We are live. It is Empire State of Baseball. Back on a Monday night, 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, November the 20th, 2023. Airing on Twitch, X, YouTube, and as always, powered by StreamYard. And gentlemen, ladies, welcome to our show. It is the beginning of the off-season series. It's been only a few weeks since that final strike three hit in Arizona and the Texas Rangers were lifting a World Series. So, as tradition, because I guess this is the second time we are doing this, so it's officially tradition on the show, we have to kick off our off-season series with the off-season agendas. But before we get there, Thomas, how are we doing today on this Monday?
We're good. Thanksgiving week, big week in the household. We host here, so
yes,
starting to get the preparations going. Excited to get that going.
What's the specialty meal on the table? Obviously, I don't want to hear turkey stuff and all that good stuff. But what's the biggest meal in the Wassable household on Thanksgiving?
So I do additional. So my wife's uncle actually makes like the roast turkey, and he lives like right around the corner. He brings over. I'm doing a smoked turkey breast.
Nice.
So that's gonna be the nice option.
Is that not just that's a deep fried turkey, right? Or is that
no? I said
smoker.
Smoked in a smoker. Yeah. Not fried. You know
fried.
the difference between fried food and smoked food? Have you had ribs?
Oh, I said deep.
Deep fried is like French fries.
Yeah.
You cook the turkey like you cook a French fries.
We're gonna.
But that's the one put in the big cylinder outside and not in front of not on a deck. So
yeah, but the smoker doesn't go in a big cylinder; it goes in a smoker.
Yeah, that's the big difference. A deep fried turkey versus smoked turkey. One's cooked in about 10 seconds. The other one's about 10 hours. That's the big difference.
Depending on how big the bird is.
Yep.
Yeah, the further you go into this, Richard, is embarrassing yourself. So everyone out there understands I'm going to smoke the turkey with some mesquite wood. And so to give people a different option from the roast turkey. I did it a couple years ago. People liked it. So going to be bringing it back this year.
Joseph, you got obviously big Thanksgiving plans this week. I know it's a big football day, of course. What do you look forward the most to with the holiday coming up?
I look forward to the football, especially. I always enjoy that. Listen, the Thanksgiving's about the 3 F's, right? Family, food, and football. and 4 if you include Tom's. So I got double helping of Thanksgiving. We're going Friday to my wife's family's Thursday to my wife's family's house, and then Friday I'm going down to Delaware to see my aunts and cousins down there. So we got 2 Thanksgivings in the Puglisi household this year. So we'll be looking forward to that, and I'll be rolling myself off the couch to go to the bathroom in between that second meal.
Yeah.
Nice. And Corey, I was going to ask you, Corey, in terms of baseball, what are you most thankful for?
Oh, I'm thankful that the season's over. I'm most thankful for baseball that we got winter meetings just a few weeks away. Nice off season. From a softball standpoint, upset we lost, but I'm thankful for a little extra sleep on Sunday. But from a baseball standpoint, definitely it's the off season. Can't wait to hear it. We actually had a couple of moves go down over the last few days. The biggest one being Aaron Nola back to the Phillies. You had a couple other trades and signings. The Braves very active. So looking forward to a lot more of that over the next few weeks here.
Yeah, absolutely. The non-tender deadline hit on Friday. So, of course, now we've seen some roster moves. You mentioned the Braves. The Braves made a couple of weird moves, but I think it was more for like roster clearing. The Yankees sending Jake Bauers to the Brewers. And then some of the non-tender highlights, Daniel Vogelbach from the Mets, for the Yankees, Albert Abreu, Lou Trevino. So a lot to talk about there. The Nola news. The Yankees actually, there's this news just hit right now. The Yankees signed Yerry De Los Santos, 25-year-old reliever, coming out of the Pittsburgh Pirates organization. Don't know what that means, if that's a major league signing or if he's going to the minor leagues there. But that just hit just a few moments ago. So
I mean, we love former Pirates pitchers. So just I'm sure he'll be great.
Yeah, he'll be great. DFA'd in a couple of weeks. So we'll
be great.
Clay Holmes worked out pretty well,
and then be on the waiver wire. That's a Cashman special.
I don't think
for
so.
A month, waiver wire, 3 months.
Clay Holmes 2.0.
Clay Holmes 2.0. Who knows? We'll find out. But we didn't add Yerry De Los Santos to our Yankees offseason agendas, which we're going to get on later on tonight. But let's get into the lineup on this first episode of the offseason series, and it's presented by our friends over at Rhoback. And it's really simple. If you're looking at the bottom of the ticker, 2 offseason agendas. One for the Mets, Corey and Joe taking the reins of David Stern separately. I'll add that separately. We have 4 separate game plans happening today, 2 with the Mets and 2 with the Yankees, of course. And Tom and I are telling a very unhinged Brian Cashman to take a seat. What is going on with Cashman lately, Thomas?
I think, listen, and we'll get into our agendas. I think Cashman is either going to go nuts this offseason and say, like, you guys don't think I can put a winning team on the field, or he's going to just absolutely hide in a corner and do nothing. And we maybe see the end of Brian Cashman. It's one or the other for him.
It's insane. I mean, some of the comments he made definitely not becoming of a high-level executive for the Yankees, especially
he's
one
back,
who's
he's
been
back
in
in
this
the
gig
corner.
For how long?
I mean,
you would have thought though, like he was on the hot seat with the way he made these comments, and he's got a job for life.
I mean, listen, I think reporters were out last year.
Reporters are out for blood. This is the worst team in 30 years, and they let him know about it. And I guess clearly he doesn't get that kind of criticism in house because he didn't seem like he handled it very well. So I don't know. It was so weird the stuff he was saying, and I don't know.
And I think
it's a clown show.
It's strange that the most fire you see out of him is basically directed back at his own player in Stanton, and it just goes to show you, the message of complacency, the message of the fans thinking that the Yankees, from the ownership to the GM to the manager and down to the players, is complacent. They are complacent with winning 83 games. They're not telling you what their plans are. They're not telling you if they're willing to exceed the luxury tax threshold.
They don't need to say. None of saying that means nothing right now. You don't need to come out and say, here's our plan, we're going to spend. It's actually you don't want to show all your cards. I don't blame him for that.
But the fans want to know how the Yankees are going to fix this mess. And the idea of hiring an internal audit, that the analytical department is hiring the audit process to audit the analytical department. I mean,
which isn't even what they're doing.
It's a very strange message coming out of the Yankees. When was the last time, and we go back to Boone and Cashman, when was the last time the Yankees could have won 83 games and the GM and manager keep their job? Has it ever happened in the last 30 years? I think the answer is no. And so Yankees fans obviously are in a place that they haven't been before. And I think the pressure is actually starting to mount on Cashman a little bit, because I don't know if he has the right answer or the right approach that doesn't conflict with what ownership wants him to do.
Yeah. And that's the thing too. Like, if he's having those conversations with ownership, and you got to, on one hand, you're trying to keep that behind the scenes because you don't want to upset the owner. But on the other hand, you're trying to defend your reputation. So it's a hard line to try and walk there. And you saw the frustrations come out from Cashman's side. I don't necessarily blame him. I mean, there's a better way to do it. Don't get me wrong. But don't necessarily blame him, because the fans, the media, a lot of times we think we're we think we are better than ownership and the front offices across the league. So I don't blame Cashman for having the emotion, but I guess the way he came across it, not necessarily the best.
We'll try to address a little bit more of it as we get into our all-season agendas later for the Yankee side of things, but we need to get down to business. And if you guys were here last year for our off-season agenda episodes, we did this in 2 parts last year. Now we're doing it all in one big 90-minute episode of Empire State of Baseball today. But
80 minutes of Joe talking.
Yeah. And you're right. This might just go 2 hours. I even completely forgot about the Joe factor and all of it. So it might be a 2-hour show, but it's at least a 90-minute show for you guys tonight. Hopefully not. But what we're doing tonight is we are assuming the roles of the general managers of our teams. These are based on, I want to say, a mix of hope and what can happen. We're obviously not going to go off the board and just go completely unrealistic. A lot of the trade values you're going to see displayed on your screen is based on baseball trade values, which is, it's a delicate measure for the current estimate value of these players. But obviously, we'll get more into it later on. So, Corey, I know you want to get this thing kicked off on the New York Mets end. So let's take a look at your off-season agenda for 22, 23, 24. Let's see what you got here, buddy.
Let's go take a look there. And I know when we did this last season, I was eerily accurate. I mean, 80% of my moves hit. I hope I'm close
with
the
move.
move.
Your own ego.
Oh, I'm stroking that ego, but at the same time, I hope you don't get the same result as we did last year. So clearly my agenda did not work for last year's team. It actually would have been even worse because I had them going for Rodon instead of Verlander. So a whole different conversation there. But for this year, taking a look at what we got, obviously we got a new front office in there with David Stearns at the helm. Do expect to have some changes, but the biggest thing too, and we see it at the bottom right-hand corner, what are the focus areas that this team absolutely must improve on after a very, very disappointing 2023 season, pretty much across the board, no matter who you're talking with, whether it's a fan or someone around the game, they got to bolster the starting rotation. All right. They need multiple arms, not one or two. I mean, they need to overhaul this rotation because you only got two legitimate options in Kodai Senga and Quintana coming back next year. You have a bunch of cusp guys too, bottom of the rotation options like a McGill. Peterson was one of them, but now we found out he's getting surgery. He's probably going to miss about half the season, roughly. Jose Budo down the stretch, not terrible. You got Lucchesi as well. So you got a lot of those fringe guys who end up staying in the bullpen half the time, minors part of the time, and the rotation part of the time. But if you're counting on multiple of those guys in your rotation, you're going to be in for a bad time. So definitely want to touch on the rotation. I'll get into that more in a moment. Acquiring a power hitter. This is another big thing, too. They need to get a little more pop in that lineup. They actually got a little more pop down the stretch between Lindor and Alonso. Alonso had a very, very productive last 6 weeks or so of the season. So that kind of inflated the Mets' power numbers a bit because if you were looking at that Mets team early in the first half, their power numbers were really not that great. But then when you factor in Alvarez having a very nice summer, Alonso having a very nice, last 6 weeks or so. Lindor woke up after the first 2 months of the season. He had a very nice year as well. So the power did improve over the course of the season. But I do want one more legitimate power bat to slot after Alonso. And speaking of Alonso, we got to extend this guy. This is the offseason that you have to absolutely make a move. All right. Are you extending him, which is 100% what I would do? I'll go into some offers in a moment. Or are you going to trade him? Because the last thing I want to have happen here is you play out the year, he goes to free agency and signs somewhere else. I said last year, Alonso, while it wasn't the highest priority, I thought last year was the year to do it, especially coming off the Aaron Judge, Arson Judge situation in the offseason. Do not want to go through that with Alonso. So when we did this agenda episode last year, that was right around the Arson Judge time where we thought he was going to Giants, ended up not. So want to avoid that situation entirely. Only way to do it is to make a move this offseason. Trading is the hot topic right now. It would upset a lot of fans, including myself. I mean, if you're getting three absolute studs, maybe you live with it. But this is the guy. I mean, you think of the New York Mets right now. You think of Pete Alonso. In the prior generation, you could say DeGrom, the generation before that, David Wright, Jose Reyes. Those were the guys you thought about. Mike Piazza before then. It's Pete Alonso right now. He's the face of your team. I want to get this guy extended. But before I dive too much into the weeds, any thoughts on the focus areas or any comments on what I said above?
Joe?
Yeah. I mean, listen, I like Corey's plan. I don't know how Washington feels about Lane Thomas at this particular point in time. I think he had 26 home runs last year. That's definitely one of those options that is, kind of an under the radar move. JD Martinez had a great year last year. He brings a veteran bat into that lineup. Can be that consistency. So I like that move. I know that move's been floated about. The big things are the pitchers. I mean, Corbin Burns, that's a big time trade. And Yamamoto, I think a lot of people are into it. You're going to see a similar game plan toward, in my book, as Corey has here. Corey did a lot of 1 year, 2 year deals, keep the payroll low. We have a lot of dead money on the books this year, but it's one of those, huh?
Keep the payroll low. The highest.
No, keep the payroll past this year flexible. That's the big key.
Flexibility is key.
If you're above that third tier or that fourth tier, which the Mets are going to be no matter what, you don't want to be above that fourth tier for the next 10 years, starting this year. So you put yourself in a position where, listen, based off these signs, $10 million off the books next year with Martinez, $8 million for more. The Mets have $51 million in dead money this year. And most of it's coming off the books next year. I think they'll have $20 million next year. So you're going to automatically have a much lower payroll next year without even losing any players. So I think that's kind of what the Mets approach this season's going to be, unless, of course, they fall in love with somebody. I think Yamamoto is the one guy you're going to see them go to the nines for. 25-year-old starting pitchers with his pedigree and even though it is Japan, do not come on the free agent market.
Yeah, no, that's true. 100%.
The Lane Thomas move is a creative one. I question if the Nationals would do that trade within division. I don't think they'd have that much of an issue. And obviously, as you see in the baseball trade value, the Nationals would win that deal. And again, if we're going to just kind of compare that same measure to the Burns deal, you might need a little bit more to get the Burns deal done. I know Burns is owed about.
Brewers absolutely laugh at that offer. I think that this could be the offer.
You got to get.
I think you need Brewers Twitter yelling at us. For being honest.
And I was thinking about it too, because the biggest thing when it came to a Corbin Burns trade, I'm like, all right, what's the value here? How are we going to make this balance out and make it work? And I was reading a lot of articles which went both ways. I read articles from Brewers people, not necessarily their beat writers or anything like that, but people that follow the team. They were mentioning guys where it's like a 6th and a 7th prospect, and I thought that was like laughably low. I'm like, really? That's it? And then I read articles where it's given like 2 or 3 top 5 prospects, so all over the map. Then they're saying, do they want a major league pitcher? Do they not want a major league pitcher?
Yeah, that part of it is always tough because you don't know what a team wants.
Yeah,
the Brewers have been pretty good as of late, so you think they'd want more major league ready bodies to fill the void. I just think a full. I know Burns is just a rental, but a full year of an ace is gonna cost more than Mark Vientos, who was not great last year,
and for guys less than. And just for a little less than $16 million, Tom, you get one of the premier starters in all of baseball.
Yeah, I think he's gonna cost one of your top 3 prospects. Yeah, I mean, I was trying to think back.
Would have to be in it.
I would think so. I would think, like thinking back to the big trade deadline, pitchers that have moved, and I know like the one that comes to mind is the Scherzer, but Scherzer was also attached to Trey Turner, so that makes it a little messy, but. I don't know. It's going to cost more than that. I think it'd be a great fit for him, but I just think it's going to cost way more. And then, go on.
No, I was just going to say it gets tricky too with that trade. The 1 year part is really what makes it tough too, because it's like, all right, you got a high caliber ace for 1 year. If he had even an extra year, it completely changes the type of offer. I mean, the Brewers literally could ask for the moon if he had even 1 more year on that deal. So it makes it a little tricky there. So I agree. I think it'll end up being a little more. The one name I was seeing somewhat consistently was Clifford, and that's why I did have him. Mets 6th overall prospect, got him this past trade deadline, as we know. That's a name that has been floated around there. Mark Vientos, I agree. He did struggle last year. The one thing it calls out, though, it does fit a couple of Brewers' needs, third base and first base, were both positions that a few of the Brewers offseason reports. Yeah, they off-season reports on the Brewers side call out both those positions. So Vientos does have experience at both, not good experience at both.
Yeah, I was gonna say they're not. Yeah, bad experience at both.
Correct, bad experience at both, but at least he's played the position. So it's a matchup from positional need at best. But Clifford's an interesting prospect. I threw in Calvin Ziegler there too. He's a little low at 19, but then it all boils down to how do other organizations view your prospects? 19 in one could be top 10 in another. And we were having those conversations last deadline, especially because I know the David Robertson trade, for example, at the Mets, They didn't get a top 10 prospect in the Marlins system. They were in the teens, and all of a sudden they come to the Mets, and now you're talking maybe top 10 prospects there. So each team values them a little different. I do think it'll take a little more, but Corbin Burnes exactly fits the mold of what the Mets need to do. I do think they make a big trade. That's why I called out Burnes. The hot name over the last week also has been Glasnow with the Rays. I'm more concerned with Glasnow because of the injuries, and it's the same situation. It's a 1-year deal because he's a free agent the year after. So I would rather spend the ammunition on a Corbin Burnes, who I feel like is going to be healthy for just about the whole season. I do not necessarily feel the same about Glasnow. The one thing with Glasnow, if they were to go that route, one other thing I was thinking, I didn't pull the trigger on it in my agenda, is they could end up tying that with like a Manuel Margot. Margot becomes your fourth outfielder, but the Mets just taking on that money is going to lesser the prospects going back. That's where it starts to get creative, because now if you're sending prospects outside your top 5 and 10 because you're taking on extra money that they don't want to eat, gets a little more enticing that way. But if just comparing the pitchers in a shell, I do want the Corbin Burnes route. And then Yamamoto. I mean, I won't be shocked if all 4 of us have Yamamoto, because he fits a nice need for both the Mets and Yankees, more so the Mets. The Mets need starting pitching a lot more than the Yankees, but it fits a good need, a good acquisition for both teams. So I won't surprise to have him on there. The one thing I didn't really call out here too, I could see the Mets making a lot of minors type deals, guys who've pitched at least a handful of games in the major leagues across their career, bringing in a ton, 3, 4, 5 of those guys on minor league deals, or like 1 year, $1 million, like league minimum deals, and just let them all battle it out for that 5th spot in the rotation in spring training. So that's a possible route. But that's what I'm looking at the rotation. Going to the bats, if you pull up the bats again. So I know we're discussing Lane Thomas and JD. JD is the easier one. I mean, Mets, we've been saying it since they brought the DH to the National League. The Mets have never prioritized the DH spot. The first year, you thought you might have had something between Dom Smith and JD Davis. You get both of them in there, maybe Alonso a little bit. Yeah, Cano. There was some options there, all of which obviously didn't pan out for the Mets. Last year, you thought Vogelback. All right, Vogelback's a guy who's going to go out there and play 100 games DH. He's gone. Thankfully, we're all happy about that. We need to emphasize the DH, get a little more pop. I went with the JD Martinez route. And again, if you're bringing in JD, he's playing DH. If you need to sneak him in the outfield for a game or two, so be it. But he's going to be your DH. I won't be shocked if they go with a route that gives you a little more versatility, maybe a Justin Turner, and that's another name. I was back and forth between Turner and JD Martinez all week, trying to see which one I'm going to put in. I ultimately went with JD because of one of the other bench moves I made, and I was bringing in IKF essentially as your super utility.
Love it.
Yeah, listen, 2-year deal, $7 million a year, 14 total. I mean, this is a guy who can play basically any position.
Sure.
It's he won't have a starting role and will still end up starting 3 out of 7 games just because he could play so many different spots, come into the game, late inning defensive replacement. So that's kind of why I end up going the JD route as opposed to a Justin Turner. The Lane Thomas one's interesting too, because I know the divisional talk. All right, do you want to trade in division? The 2 teams that the Mets have had a good trade relationship in the division have been the Nationals and the Marlins. And we saw it just most recently with the Marlins. They have made some trades with the Nationals in the past, which is why I don't think it's out of the picture. Obviously not the Phillies or Braves, because both of them are trying to win the division next year. So they're not going to trade off assets at the major league level. So it could be a play. With Lane Thomas, it's interesting too, because he's coming off his best year. But it's not like he's a 23-year-old kid coming up. We haven't heard much about Lane Thomas because he really hasn't been good up until the last year or two. Last year, 28 home runs, 268, had an OPS of 783. Very, very nice breakout piece for the Nationals. But his second best year was the year prior in 22. Only 17 home runs, only a 705 OPS. So it's not like the guy is a superstar. He's maybe emerging a little late. He could be a 1-year wonder. This is the type of guy that next year maybe comes out and it's closer to 2022 as opposed to 23. So it's a little bit of a gamble. So I know I had the Mets taking the gamble because it also addresses a need of getting another outfielder out there, because Starling Marte, I don't trust him playing more than 100 games next year. And I don't know what Marte am I getting. Am I getting the 2022 Marte, who you can make an argument was the engine of that offense? Or are we getting last year's Marte, who whenever he played, he was hitting in the bottom half of the lineup and striking out at pitches 10 feet before home plate, not converting with guys on base. Even he struggled a bit on defense too. And that was one of his biggest strengths in 2022 was his good defense. So he just had an off year. I think the injuries added up. He was never healthy, I don't think, last year. So Lane Thomas gives you another outfielder, lets you keep McNeil at second base, at least on paper. But again, McNeil is going to get a lot of time in the outfield next year. Mauricio is going to get a lot of time at second base. He's going to get some time at third base as well. So they'll find a way to get them in there. But that's what I was thinking with the lineup. Gives you a little pop, gives you a lefty outfielder throw in there. For the most part, about the same. Going through arbitration, the only guy that I initially had on mind was Trevor Gott. Not so much because I thought he was a stud, but more so because the Mets just have no bullpen. You only have a couple of guys coming back from last year's bullpen who you could really count on. So I had them offering arbitration to Gott. They did let him go, so we took him off of this arbitration. You got Drew Smith coming back, and you don't want Drew Smith being a high leverage guy. You want him coming in maybe the sixth inning. Or a game where it's a 3-run lead. You don't want him pitching the eighth inning of a tie game. So I have them actually going back and bringing in a familiar face in David Robertson. All right. And, David Robertson, he pitched phenomenal for the Mets last year. He ended up being the closer for the first half until they traded him. He did get a lot of eighth inning opportunities too, but Buck always did that even with Edwin Diaz, put your best pitcher in the eighth inning in a different situation. So I have them going back to David Robertson to really solidify that eighth inning. Same exact contract as last year, 1 year, $10 million. Maybe he commands a little more with inflation and whatnot. So I have them going the David Robertson route. And a couple of other bullpen arms too. Threw Emilio Pagan in there again, just to get a veteran guy who's pitched in the major leagues 1 year, $5 million. That's a little more than when he came off last season. But the interesting one is Matt Moore, 1 year, $8 million. The Mets, for whatever reason, never prioritize having a second lefty. And I don't know what it is. I feel like every offseason I say, go out, get that second lefty so you're not burning the same arm. They did it with Pedro Feliciano. They did it with Blevins. Even last year, all right, you got Raleigh. Great. He was a nice pitcher to have. He was like the only guy. It's that eventually you get some guys in the minor leagues that come up too. But I want to go into a season for once with two lefties at least you could rely on. So that's why I threw Matt Moore in there as the other option. But the big thing for the bullpen is Edwin Diaz. All right, you got Edwin Diaz coming back. It's not a new acquisition. He signed last offseason with the extension. So you got to hope Diaz comes back and healthy, because if Diaz is not healthy and God forbid he gets hurt again, I mean, it doesn't matter what you do this offseason. The bullpen's not going to be good. So at least if Diaz comes back and if he's anything close to what he was in 2022, that solves half your bullpen needs right off the rip. Robertson, Moore, Pagan, right, giving you some veterans to go in there.
I like those moves, and you alluded before talking about like the impact of minor league invites. I mean, depending on how long one of these veteran relievers lasts on the market, they may have no choice and go to those those minor league deals for $1 million or less. So and a lot of lefties, surprisingly, a lot of those low risk lefties are up in the market. Not just Matt Moore. I was just looking over the list here. Guys like Brent Suter. Even like a guy like Amir Garrett, even though he's a head case, give him a shot, maybe. You got Wandy Peralta. Yeah. He's gonna warrant a major league contract, but it's not gonna be of the $10+ million variety. So you got a few of these guys. Aaron Loop, I'm seeing in here. Josh Hader, Aroldis Chapman really setting that market, but like you can get away with a guy like Matt Moore, absolutely, in your bullpen. Corey, any closing thoughts here? I really like the game plan, but what any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think the big thing is too, the Mets, in order to improve, are going to have to spend some money. And the payroll this year, I was doing my best to try and make it go lower. There was a brief point I was trying to get them down a tier to tier 3. But it's just not feasible. You got to spend money if you legitimately want to build this team up and compete next year. So their payroll right now is just about on par with where they were last year at $334 million and change. So, we'll see what ends up happening there. They will be tier 4. I think we're all pretty confident about that. But the good news is, like Joe said before, a lot of money coming off the books next year. Have a chance to get down to one of those lower tiers and reset a little bit. So ride out this year with the dead money. Hopefully these 1-year deals, 2-year deals pay off, and then you're in a good spot next year.
Great stuff, Corey. Now we'll put that plan, those two graphics up later on in the week on both X and Instagram for your guys' review. I know it was a lot of information to show on the screen, but awesome stuff. Great research, Corey. And hopefully you're on par with your numbers from last year, because you were accurate with about half the moves you made. So I'm sure Met fans are hoping for the same this year as well. Great stuff there. All righty, so we're going to move on to Joe's plan. Before we get there, Thomas, talk to us about Twitch and YouTube.
Twitch, YouTube, if you want to hang out with us live on the show, join the comment section, get your comments read on air. Twitch and YouTube are the place you're going to want to do that. You can follow us at Empire State of Baseball on both. Like, share, subscribe, tell your friends, whatever. Thanksgiving's coming up. Tell your family who's over. You got some Yankee and Met fans coming over. Let them know to check us out live when we have more upcoming shows this offseason.
Fantastic. Good stuff here, Thomas. Now, Joe, we're going to flip over to your plan. I guess in the same matter. Let's look at those focus areas first and see how you address them and take it from there. Let's see what you got here, Joe.
Yeah, so you're going to see a similar theme to Corey. I think what we did was, what I did a little bit different was bring in some different kind of names. First, for the starting rotation, again, Yamamoto, I think we all have that. I actually think he's going to go more than Corey. I think he's going to get upwards of $215 million for him. I also have the Mets going out and acquiring Tyler Glasnow from the Tampa Bay. And listen, we know what Glasnow can bring. He is a top-tier pitching talent when he is healthy. However, I think the Mets have the tools to bring him in. He's a risk-reward guy. But I think the Mets, with this game plan, also have backup options if he gets hurt. So they bring in Glasnow. I got Ronnie Mauricio, Kevin Prada, and Tyler Stewart going the other way. Ronnie Mauricio, I would think, would be very high on Tampa Bay's list, especially with the Wander Franco situation. They can get a shortstop that they can plug in there immediately if they so choose. Prada is a repeat, a repetitive position with Francisco Alvarez. And then I added a pitching prospect of Tyler Stewart. I also have in them sign in Brandon Woodruff, even though he will not pitch this year, and you do not see him in the starting rotation. I think the Stearns connection is important. You bring him in basically for 2025. I think Quintana's contract will be up, and Woodruff would then take his spot. And then the final piece of this of the puzzle for the starting rotation is Kyle Gibson. 2 years, $24 million. And listen, we can say a lot about Gibson. He's got a lot of ups and downs. Most of the time you kind of expect around a 4.5 ERA. But there's one thing about Kyle Gibson. He has a rubber arm, and he's going to pitch 190 innings for you. And the Mets need that. So between those three and the fact that they have Joey Lucchesi, Tyler McGill, David Peterson, and even Jose Butto, you have enough there to complement the rotation in case you get one or multiple injuries, especially with Glasnow and Quintana. You can plug in from there. I expect that they would also get some starts. As far as the lineup is concerned, I had twofold. I had the Mets going out and acquire Eloy Jimenez straight up for Ryan Clifford. I think you can get Eloy Jimenez. It maybe even cheaper than that.
Yes, you can.
Jimenez has a 1-year, $13 million deal. The Mets can plug him at DH. He does not have to touch the field. You can see how much you can get out of him. And if you like what you get, he has the next 2 years are option years.
That's
so you
big.
can literally go year to year with Eloy and see if he stays healthy, you pick up the next option. If he stays healthy again, you pick up the next option. If he gets hurt, you let him go at the end of the year. Nobody's the wiser. You didn't give up that much for him. I think he provides a legitimate power bat. For the left field spot, I went back and forth. I don't think the Mets would go to the point that would take to get Teoscar Hernandez, who's a free agent who I would much rather prefer. But Lourdes Gurriel has a good contact bat. He's not overly flashy as far as offensive is concerned, but he can kind of stabilize that left field position, which I think both the Mets and the Yankees have a problem with now. Again, 3 years, $34 million. If he's not, in a year or two, if he's not a starting caliber outfielder, you're not paying him that much that you wouldn't mind him being that fourth outfielder off the bench. I think that would be a positive. And then to round out the offensive acquisitions, I got them bringing in Elvis Andrus. Listen, if you're trading Ronnie Mauricio, you need an insurance policy for shortstop. Elvis Andrus, I think, is now the major league hit leader, the active hit leader with Miguel Cabrera retiring. I think he's got over 2,000 hits. Wow. But you bring him in. He can play shortstop. He can play second base or third base in a pinch. He's a veteran. He can come off the bench. And I think he's a good backup to have on the infield. Jeff McNeil can go out in right field if Starlin Marte gets hurt. Elvis Andrus can start at second base if you need that. I have Vientos being in there. Again, Vientos can go into the DH role, slide into third base if Brett Beatty's not doing well. That's why I have there. And then finally, the bullpen. Listen, Corey, you were on the same page as me. Matt Moore. I originally had Ronaldo Lopez, but he signed with Braves today.
Yeah.
So that was disappointing. I got David Robertson coming back 1 year, $8 million. I think Matt Moore is actually going to get a little bit more than just 1 year. He's one of the few lefties available. 3 years, $18 million for him. I think that's about the right mark. He's had a good 2 years out of the bullpen. And then the other name I like is Ryan Stanek. He comes over from Houston. He's pitched in big games before, in big spots. He's got an attitude about him. And yeah, you know what? He gives up his hits. He gives up his home runs. But I like a guy who comes and rises to the moment. I think we've seen that in the playoffs from him. I like that little bit of attitude he brings. He's not a setup guy, but he's a guy that you can bring in high leverage situation, guys on base, and things like that. I think that's the key. And then, yeah, I would extend Pete Alonso. I don't have that move on here. But I would also do it. These have to be solved first, and then we can discuss Alonso. I think ultimately Alonso stays for Met for life or close to it.
I thought you didn't want to go to war with Boris a year before he gets free agency.
I get a feeling that he's going to reach free agency, but at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, I think Alonso is not going to do what DeGrom did, which is not even call the Mets after the fact. I think you're going to get the last right of refusal with Alonso, and at the end of the day, if they present a contract that's been offered, the Mets will top that contract with him. I think they will go above and beyond. But listen, this balloons the payroll. It's $360-something million. It's similar to this year. But the good news with this, you got Andrews, you got Robertson, you got a bunch of guys that will come off the books. If you don't want to keep Eloy, that's $13 million off the books the following year. And all the dead money that is sitting there with Scherzer, Verlander, McCann, I think of the $49 million. I think 28 and a half leave next year. That's going to be a big plus too. And same with Glasnow. Glasnow gets hurt. You don't have to extend him. If you don't give up that much for him, you don't have to extend him. If he stays healthy, great. We can have that discussion in the offseason about him being a part of the future. But for me, he's going to have to prove it. I'm convinced when he is on the field, he is a top 10, probably a top 10 pitcher in baseball. The problem is him being on the field.
Yeah.
And, like I said, Yamamoto, I'm really high on Yamamoto. I know people question, like, what has he done? How can somebody give him $200 million? Listen, 25-year-old starting pitchers do not become free agents. And he has already proven he can get major league players out. He did so in the World Baseball Classic. He proved he could pitch in top moments. He has won multiple Cy Young, the equivalent of Cy Youngs in Japan. This kid's the real deal. There might be growing pains. We saw that with Senga a little bit of command issues, but his stuff is incredible. And there's a reason why 7, 8, 9, 10 teams are going to be in on him. Mets, Yankees, Dodgers, Cubs, Giants, they're all going to be in on this kid because these kind of pitchers do not come to the free agent market at the age of 25.
Exactly. No, Yamamoto is going to be easily the most I mean, you have Ohtani too, and that's what makes it even crazier because you have Ohtani as a free agent, but Yamamoto's offseason right now, it's going to be so intriguing to see how everything plays out with him. We'll see what ends up happening there, but 3 points, first one, not even Met related, just having Elvis Andrus in there. Elvis Andrus, I still can't believe this guy's already in his mid-30s because in my mind, he's still like 29 years old. But,
really, in my mind, he's like 45.
Yeah.
I don't understand Elvis Andrus still in the league.
It's crazy. So it really stood out to me, Joe, when you said he was the league leader now, active leader in hits. So that was crazy to see. The second point is, I mean, our plans are very, very similar, like you said. I mean, we're really attacking the same exact point, slightly different way of going about it. The Woodruff one's interesting too because it really is an investment. All right, you're punting a little bit in the short term to get more for the long term. And not to say that this year would be a punt. He could be a guy that comes back in August and pitches for you down the stretch, which would be perfect if you are in that playoff contention. So, like the Woodruff one, the one that's most interesting to me is the Eloy Jimenez because this is a guy. A lot of potential, but another one who seems to get hurt and he gets these freak injuries. I remember the one a couple of years ago where it was like the last week of spring training or the first week of the season. And what did he do? He tore his Achilles or something, or his calf and making an outfit, just making a catch at the wall. So he gets these freak injuries, but he's got some untapped potential there. And you saw it his rookie year. I know his numbers lately haven't been that rookie year number, but that's a lot of good upside. So I think the big thing with Joe, with yours, real quick, and I'll get back to you. You have a lot of investment for the upside here, going with the Glass now, despite the risk, going with the Woodruff, knowing you don't have him short term, going with Eloy, knowing the risk with injury. But these are upside investments. You're taking a big swing, and if you hit, you're going to hit it out of the park.
Yeah, and my thing with Eloy is my intention is to not he's not even going to touch the outfield, and that's my intention with him. Having McNeil be that super utility guy. If you do get an injury to Marte, McNeil can slide in there, and then all of a sudden second base is open for Luis Angel Acuna to come up. So the Mets have put them in this situation. They put themselves in the position where either Marte or Eloy come down. They can adjust on the fly and put themselves in a position where McNeil can slot into right, Gurriel can go to DH, and McNeil can go to left, and Acuna can slot in at that second base. And that's what makes that injury risk worth absorbing in this situation. Listen, if we get 135 games out of Eloy Jimenez at DH, he's got a couple of hamstring injury ILs, fine. He's going to hit 35 home runs in that time frame. He's got that type of power and that type of talent.
Yeah.
And when that lineup's going good, him and Alonso back to back, those are two big bats that you do not want to face in the lineup. And again, for the amount that you're going to give up for him, I don't think there is a better power replacement that you can go out and get that isn't going to either cost $200 million or cost you a ton of prospects. So this, to me, is that kind of middle ground.
You have John Carlos Stanton if you want. He fills a lot of those voids. When he's healthy, he's an elite power hitter. Pair him with Alonso.
But he doesn't cost $13.83 million in AAV as Eloy. I don't mind the risk move there, Joe. I think you're grossly overpaying for Eloy Jimenez. I actually think
very much could be.
I think to get it done with him, you could probably give up a top. I would say somewhere in the 20s. Maybe this Luis R. Rodriguez fella that Corey Favs had mentioned in his trade to Lane Thomas. Maybe it takes a deal straight up for Eloy to get that done. And I agree. Eloy Jimenez, 26-year-old, he is a full-time DH at this point in his career. He cannot take the outfield. He has not played a full season worth merit since really the kickoff of his career. 122 games in 2019. Actually, the season where he actually looked like he got his return investment was 2020, the shortened year. He played 55 games in a 60-game season. So Eloy's gonna be fun to try to keep on the field, but the easiest way to keep him on the field Just keep him off the field. So
yeah,
but
and
Lourdes Gurriel, I like it because Gurriel at least has a little bit of versatility. So I know you talked about McNeil moving, flexing to the outfield. Gurriel could easily flex into the infield if need be. So I do like that move.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that the Mets and Yankees, the Yankees do a little bit better than the Mets. The Mets and Yankees, though, historically have not done a good job at buying low and basically rehabilitating somebody. And it seems that Stearns, who came over from the Brewers are the poster child for buying low. They buy guys off the scrap heap and rehabilitate them. I think that's something, and especially in New York, you don't have the luxury of time that some of the small franchises do. And I think it's so hard. The Yankees are actually really good at it from a bullpen standpoint. And I don't think the Yankees are really good at it from a position player standpoint. And the Mets just aren't good at it. You know what I mean? So from my view, I think Stearns is going to bring that kind of mentality. Hey, we're going to take shots on guys. We're going to go after guys that are undervalued or devalued, and we're going to give them a new lease on life. I think that's what you have here with this plan in both Glasnow and Eloy due to their injury history.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I like it. Any final close? Tom, did you have anything on Joe's roster before we flip things over to the Yankee side of the house?
Not a lot. You know, him and Corey went about it. You said the same way. I think these are all moves that would improve the Mets. It just depends. It's a lot of free agents to go out and sign, which I know the Mets have a lot of holes, so they're going to have to sign a lot of free agents. It's not like they're not going to sign a ton of guys. But yeah, I mean, Yamamoto is definitely the interesting one. The one thing that I feel like I read a lot that I just think is nonsense with him is people saying like, well, because of Senga, that's like an easy in for him. I want someone to name me the last time two major Japanese pitchers were on the same MLB roster. And major Japanese pitchers have been playing in this country for like 25 years. I'm not saying that won't be the reason, but to say that like, well, you know, Senga's here. Like, I think that is a complete non-factor in the situation. The money he's gonna go where he gets paid the most, and / where he's most comfortable. And we have seen at times the Japanese players like to stay on the West Coast, so they're a lot closer to home. If the Mets, I think the Mets or the Yankees or anyone on the East Coast who wants him, I think will be having to really pay for it more than a team that's on the West Coast.
So apparently, and I've read an article about this alluding to your point, Tom, the reason why Japanese players don't typically go to the same team is there is a cultural aspect to respecting your elders and those who came before you. So they typically avoid the team that the older Japanese player goes to, or the guy that came before them. So in this case, Senga. However, in this particular case, both Senga and Yamamoto have said that they don't subscribe to that rule as old players have. Whether or not Ohtani does is another question. I avoided Ohtani. It doesn't seem like the Mets, unless a shock of monumental proportions happens, have a realistic chance at him. You can never doubt Cohen's money and his spending ability.
He's the same thing, and it's the same with a lot of these guys. The real top level guys, they're going to go where they get paid the most. And if the Mets were going to pay Ohtani $600 million, he'll be a Met tomorrow. But it's just depending, will they be willing to do that? And my point is, it's just be the same with Yamamoto. I don't think Senga being here really has any weight on that decision. I think it's where it's either location and who's going to pay the most, and that's where he should go.
I will say, you know, if I was coming from Japan and I had two offers that were identical and Senga was on one team and there's nobody on another team that speaks Japanese, you know, it might be an easier transition to go play with somebody you've played with before, that you've spent time on international teams with, and that can help you with the translation into and assimilation into that team.
It hasn't happened before.
I agree. I think it's a little overblown, but at the same time, if you have two equal offers and one has somebody that you know from your home country and the other person doesn't, that might be a factor. You know, this isn't, you know, Spanish players coming from Mexico or Latin America, where you have a ton of players speaking Spanish. In the big leagues, it's you and your translator are the ones who speak Japanese. There's no random players usually that speak Japanese other than the Japanese players that come over. So it's much fewer and far between than the Latin American players. So I think the comfort level and the adjustment is a little bit more radical now for the Japanese players just because of that culture barrier.
All right. Well, Joe, great work here. Great research from both our Mets GMs. Again, a lot of similar plans. Obviously, it seems like the biggest deal is Yoshinobu Yamamoto. So I think at this rate, if Yamamoto doesn't end up in New York, whether it's a Met or Yankee, it'll be a total surprise to everybody here. But all right, we'll move forward now with the Yankees side of the house. But before we do that, what's our next spot over here? Oh, we got Instagram. Corey, tell us about Instagram. He doesn't want to talk to us about Instagram.
Oh, sorry. I am muted on stuff. I don't want to talk about Instagram. No. But if you want to go on Instagram, you will get audio, and you'll also get access to our reels. So go ahead and check it out. We also post clips from the show. All right. Empire State of Baseball. That's our Instagram. Go check it out. And each of us individually, myself at Corey Fabs, Joe at JR Pugs, Rich at Rich J Rivera, and Tom at T Waspel. Again, reels, recaps, and more, and audio. So go get it.
And more importantly, in the coming days, you'll get the full off-season agendas that we were reviewing today also on Instagram as well. So you will see that up for your review and pleasure. But now it's time to get into my plan with the New York Yankees. And it's been a wild couple weeks. We alluded to earlier in the show about the whole Cashman ordeal. So now that we're telling Cashman, hey, listen, man, it's been great. Just, it's time to take a walk. Now, Tom and I are going to step in and help fix this New York Yankees team to the best of our realistic ability. But let's get into it with my game plan for the 2024 New York Yankees. And here we have it. And we're going to address these focus areas first. And of course, I put the emphasis on left-handed hitting. And I've said it multiple times, and I'll say it again. The Yankees have one of the greatest advantages in all of sports with that right field, short porch. And yet they've only had basically one or two consistent lefties in their lineup for the last 2 years. Well, really, it's just been Rizzo. Wells just emerged. And if the Yankees do get a lefty, it seems to be a Jake Bauers type or Willie Calhoun type that come up as a next man up mentality. It is time to shore up our left-handed hitters. Now, what I did here was bring in Kevin Kiermaier, who's been the safe bet for the Yankees as a guy who's going to fill in as Jason Dominguez continues to recover from his Tommy John surgery. Most pundits have Kiermaier linked to the Yankees as a safe bet, barring that a big player like Bellinger or Soto falls through. But I think Kiermaier should be a plan regardless. I think this is a good veteran left-handed hitting outfield. You've seen him do some damage against the Yankees in the past in big games while he was a Tampa Bay Ray. Made some unbelievable plays out there. So kind of fills that Harrison Bader level defense void. And then you get a lefty in there who got a little bit more speed. So I like Kiermaier for that regard. But I do love me some Brendan Donovan. And that's a guy who's going to cost you a lot because Donovan does have a few years left of control with St. Louis. But St. Louis is trying to purge some of those young contact bats that they have spread out throughout the lineup. I mean, the problem with the Cardinals is their big players last year did not have their best of years. And they have some prospects that are knocking on the door, waiting to take some of these spots. So somebody's got to get moved. I'm hearing names like Alec Burleson, Tyler O'Neill, a familiar name. But Brendan Donovan is one of those names that the Cardinals might try to move. And I say the Yankees try to jump on it. Donovan's a utility man at best. Second base is his primary position, but I got him here slotted over at third. Oswald Peraza, the headliner, going back to the Cardinals in this trade. The Cardinals slightly winning this deal. I tried to make sure in our BTVs that the opposing team was going to win these deals, although it's by slim margins. And honestly, to get Donovan done, it might take another player to do it on top of Arias, Efros, and Peraza. Efros also has several years of control as well. So left-handed contact, we're addressing with Donovan and Kiermaier. Left-handed power, and this is where it gets fun. Juan Soto to the New York Yankees, along with a New York native, Tom Cosgrove. Left-handed reliever coming back as well. The Yankees sending Chase Hampton, Everson Pereira, Brock Selvage, and Clark Schmidt. Now, if you remember from my focus areas from a few weeks back and when I posted up on Instagram, the deal I had going to the Padres was a lot juicy and a lot different, but damn, times have changed. I mean, back then I had Spencer Jones, the number one prospect for the Yankees, going in the deal. Now, with the revelation of the $50 million loan from the Padres, and honestly, with the owner passing away, and it's an unfortunate thing, you could tell that this owner was doing everything he can. Peter Seidler was doing everything he can to try to bring a championship back to San Diego. Unfortunately, he passed away. So the Padres are in this financial crunch where they have to move these players that they possibly can. So many no trade clauses across the board for a lot of the big contracts they've handed out over the last couple of years. Soto is a guy that they need to trade. It is not a choice. Soto is going to get traded this offseason. The Yankees got to jump on this. You want to be the evil empire again, you make this move to try to get Juan Soto right now. And for the Padres, if they don't trade him now, his value is only going to go down from here. Come the trade deadline, Soto's deal is not going to be as juicy as it is right now. And this deal significantly changed from what I had a few weeks back to now, and they need major league ready pitching. I'm sending him Clark Schmidt. Chase Hampton is ready to take that major league step. Brock Selvage, the lefty, who's also, I believe, in his his early 20s. Everson Pereira kicked around the majors last year. Obviously, wasn't a great showing from Pereira, but the Yankees' number 3 prospect would fill an outfield void on the major league level when sent over to San Diego. And again, I try to make sure San Diego wins this deal. 49.50 on our BTV right there. And acquiring a back-end starter is my number 3 priority. Listen, as enticing as Yamamoto is, the Yankees should not be going for a frontline starter that's going to be costing them big money. Because guess what? They did it last year in Carlos Rodon. And unfortunately, you made your bed, you got to sleep in it. Rodon had a nightmarish first year. You paid him $27 million in AAV a year. He has to be your number 2 pitcher, at least for another couple of seasons, before you even think about replacing that position on the Yankees, that 1A to Gerrit Cole. So for the Yankees, I'm entrusting the great efforts we saw from Michael King towards the tail end of the season and putting him in the rotation. Listen, with Rodon and Nestor Cortez, you fear about the injury, that you fear that injury bug's going to come again. And Joe hit it on the head. Kyle Gibson's got a rubber arm, and he is a perfect pitcher to have in those situations when they crop up. And I have him as my 5 starter as well. So I did get a kick out of Joe putting Gibson on his team, but I'm taking Gibson for the Yankees, who's got a lot of American League East experience as is, pitching with the Orioles. In the bullpen, as I mentioned, Cosgrove would join the team as the Yankees' primary lefty, ultimately supplanting Wandy Peralta. Trent Thornton coming over in a weird deal with Seattle. We got Kyle Higashioka and Yoenis Gomez both out of options. The Mariners could use a veteran backstop behind Cal Raleigh. I think that's a good fit for them. Yoenis Gomez fills in a bullpen spot. They got plenty of relief. They need relief help as they can get. Trent Thornton is a guy who's arbitration eligible. He's going to make $1 million this year. Same with Haggerty. So I got them coming in the deal. Again, Seattle would win that deal. Haggerty would be our utility man, kind of supplanting Cabrera a bit as Oswaldo tries to get more at-bats in the AAA level. And then a little weird deal. Rortvedt going to the Rockies. Again, another player who's out of options, bringing in Evan Justice. And I believe that's it. We got the arbitration kind of covered there. And ultimately, one of the biggest things that I wanted to point out here is Giancarlo Stanton. At this point, guys, like we've been through it so many times with Giancarlo. You can't move him. The only way you can potentially get him off this team is cutting him. That's it. No team is helping the Yankees out with Giancarlo. So at this point, you'd rather just play him than cut and burn $98 million remaining. So for me, listen, Stanton's on this team. He's our guy in the lineup at DH. I was trying to figure out a way maybe to bring in a left-handed complement that can spell him sometimes, but that's our guy. And the Yankees are probably a year or two away from making that really tough decision. I don't think it's now. Thomas, what was your reaction on some of the moves we made here?
I guess just to pick up real quick from the Stanton thing, I don't have him moving in my agenda. I do think it's possible. I think the Yankees have to eat about half of his contract. And I think it's possible someone would take a flyer on him. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I don't think it's impossible. I don't think the only way to get rid of him is to cut him. I think you eat half that money and you attach a prospect. I think a team would consider it. That being said, I like what you got going on here. I know the biggest hole the Yankees really have, and they've had for a couple of years now, is left field. You went the Juan Soto route, which I love seeing. I went the other route that's been talked about and rumored about a lot. Soto is, they do need just to shed that payroll. And it sounds like they want major league ready arms. So especially a guy like Clarke Schmidt who proved last year he could do it. You're gonna have a cheap arm there, Hampton as well. So I like what you got going here. The other thing is, and I have Higashioka just kind of getting traded as well. I think in mine I haven't really been mostly dumped. I do think he could have some value in the trade market. The catching market is extremely thin, and he has proven to be a very good defensive catcher who can have a very streaky bat, a guy who has the power to hit 20 home runs if he was starting. They would be in, bunches. He would hit, 5 in a 2-week span and then not hit one for a month. But he is a guy I think who could have some value out there. I think this does solve a lot of Yankees problems. Will it happen? Who knows?
Yeah, and I think the biggest one too. Obviously, I was just gonna say the biggest one you got there, Rich, too, is Soto. And if there's one team that's going to make a trade and you want to talk about checking off boxes, I mean, Soto just checks off so many boxes of what that team needs. And I discussed it on multiple shows in the last month that Yankees, they need that lefty pop. They have their OPS was bottom tier in baseball. They're not taking advantage of the right field short porch. They need some quality outfield depth. I mean, you're literally hitting on every box that they need with the Soto deal. The more I hear about it, the more I think it's going to happen because it just makes so much sense. So that's just the first call out I want to make there, Rich.
And he's not going to resign. He's not going to resign before.
And I'll make another point here.
Correct.
I'm sorry. Go for that, Tom. I just flubbed right over you.
I was just gonna say he's not gonna sign. The other reason why his the trade value isn't as crazy high is there's really no world that Boris is gonna let him sign an extension. I guess unless the money is insane. So I think this truly is a rental, and you hope that he likes it, and then you can negotiate him in the offseason and think you have an advantage. But that's as far as that's gonna go.
Yo, let me have it.
Yeah, so the sneaky move that I like is a Brendan Donovan, because I think Donovan could come in and give the Yankees something that they haven't really had in a long time, which is a leadoff hitter that can get on base and that can set the table for the big guys. And in this particular case, you got a leadoff hitter in Donovan, and you can construct the lineup any way you want in the next 3. I would assume it would be Donovan 1, Soto 2, Judge 3, and Rizzo 4, and then you can go from there, whether it's Torres, Volpe, and then Stanton, or whatever you want to do. I think that sets the table, and I think that's the goal with anything with the Yankees, is you have to find balance in the lineup. And the Yankees don't have that balance in the lineup. They don't have a table setter. They don't have guys that are really can generate traffic. Did the Yankees hit a home run today? They won. Did the Yankees not hit a home run today? They lost. And that's what's kind of come down to the last few years. And I think that a guy like Donovan, even Soto, listen, he's a power hitter, but at the end of the day, Soto is an on-base guy. He generates traffic, slow traffic, but it's traffic. And I think the Yankees need a little bit of that. My biggest concern with this is, listen, Gibson solves a big problem and will eat a ton of innings for the Yankees, but the Yankees start and rotation depth is thin. I mean, but Cortez and Rodon have been hurt. King has not been a full-time starter, so you don't know what he's going to look like in a full-time role. You liked what you saw last year, but at the end of the day, if he goes 29, 30 starts into the season, what's that going to look like at the end? And what's the Yankee insurance policy if you're dealing Clarke Schmidt away for that rotation spot, especially when 2 of the guys were injured or 3 of the guys were injured in the previous year?
I can address that too there, Joe. Again, for the Yankees, when you look at their last few years, especially making moves, the Yankees have actually done, I think they've gone out of their way to try to improve their starting rotation multiple times throughout the even though those moves, some of those moves blew up in their face. Talk about Montas, even Sonny Gray years ago, but they've tried to at least assess the starting rotation, and I can trust they can do that again come the trade deadline. I cannot trust them when it comes to figuring out what to do with this offense. And I think if they need to shift focus. It needs to be all about the offense, if anything. And again, if you have money to spare on a pitcher that can give you legs, then so be it. To be honest, as exciting as Yamamoto would be, if I were to come out of this offseason thinking that the Yankees' big move this year was signing Yamamoto, it's a failure of an offseason for the New York Yankees because it didn't address the biggest issues that they've had.
Correct. And another thing just to keep in mind with all the free agents is we've talked about Kyle Gibson a couple times now. There are a ton of quality, average-ish, middle back end of the rotation guys available in free agency. You got some of these guys are higher up on them, but you got your Stromans, you got your Ryus, you got your Martin Perez, you got Erod is now a free agent. You have Gibson. You got who else? Manai is a free agent.
James Paxton.
Like there's guys.
Michael Wacha.
You have Jordan Montgomery. There's a lot of guys. Again, some of these guys aren't lower level guys. Some of them are a little more higher level, but what you don't see a lot on the free agent market this year is hitting. So the Yankees need to other than Bellinger and Ohtani, there's not a lot of quality hitting out there, impact hitting. So to make moves like trading for Soto, trading for Donovan, I think the Yankees are going to need to if they want to improve this offense. Unless they really just hit free agency and it goes the way they want, it's going to have to be through trade. So I do like what you had going on there.
Yep. And the Gibson piece, too, round off the rotation. I know we're just talking on the pitching, too. I mean, I think you said it well, Rich. I mean, you're getting a veteran guy who's going to make his starts. And in a Yankee rotation, outside Cole brought a lot of question marks as to who was going to pitch that day. The questions getting answered with Kyle Gibson. In terms of the high upside, you just made that massive expense with Rodon. All right, that's your big investment from last season. You got to go out and hope he's that guy. And if he is that two guy you wanted or close to it, and he gives you 20, 25 starts at minimum, you hope more, but at minimum, throw in Gibson, making 30 starts, rounding out that rotation, giving you nothing flashy, but he's going to give you a major league performance each time. It's not a bad way to round out your rotation. So I do like that as your last arm.
One missed note that I forgot to mention. I know Joe brought up Brendan Donovan before. Another reason why I like Donovan, he could be a guy that could step into the second base position if Gleyber Torres ends up not staying with the Yankees. And that's a guy now you have in your roster and in your lineup consistently for, I believe, the next 3 seasons following the 2024 campaign. So another reason why I like Donovan, he moves around, but he can fill that second base position. I have a big $15 million bat now on the bench in DJ LeMahieu. And of course, LeMahieu is going to get his fair share, but I would go into the season and send a clear message that DJ, you got to go back to earning your playing time when we first signed you. And I know you're an older guy, and I know you're trying to get better, but from what I saw from DJ last year, I would not be happy or feel comfortable with him being a starting player on this team again. So we'll see how Tom addresses the DJ LeMahieu situation and more for his offseason agenda. But before we get there, Joe, what do we got? What's the latest with X? We got more followers?
Yeah, we have surpassed, I think we've surpassed 2,500 followers. Is that right?
Yep.
On X. We're also airing live on there. You can follow us at ESP Podcast and follow us individually. Corey at G Gory, myself at JR Pugs, Rich at Rich J Rivera, and Tom at T Waspel, all on X. Again, we go live for all these shows there as well. So you can give us a follow, converse with us, stay in touch with everything we got going on there as well.
Excellent stuff. That's us on X. Give us all a follow. But we're just going to wrap up this offseason agenda with Thomas's New York Yankees. Tom, take it away.
Sure. So I know we're starting with these focus areas. So I had the Yankees moving on from Gleyber Torres, and the reason why is because he is an asset. He is going to be his last year of arbitration. I do think There is he does, hold some very good value out there. And a team I had him going to, I was reading a lot of articles, the Dodgers having him go over there. A team that could use him in the lineup, getting Mookie out of playing second, getting him back to the outfield. Gleyber is a average-ish defensive second baseman. Sometimes he has some lapses, but maybe the change of scenery will help him more out there. And then they had the Yankees bringing back Michael Busch, one of the Dodgers prospects who's kind of just blocked in the outfield at this point. A guy who's is a big bat, but it sounds like maybe defensively is not the best. But it could be a guy that does bode well for playing in Yankee Stadium at some point in his future. Which again, it's really just at that point it's moving on from Gleyber because they have too many infielders. If you with DJ, Peraza, and Gleyber and Volpe, I know someone's going to get hurt and all of that, but it's too much capital tied up in there. So it's moving on from him. I could see them wanting to move and trade to get a starting pitcher possibly, especially if they're going to do something like trade a Clark Schmidt to get a Juan Soto. So all that's kind of in the air. All these moves are have to be tied together in some way. So that's why I have Gleyber, unfortunately leaving. I do like Gleyber, but it's just, that's the opportunity out there. For acquiring a left fielder, I had the Yankees going the other route. Instead of trading for Soto, I had them signing Bellinger. Bellinger is an interesting player. He's a guy who was a former MVP and then seemingly forgot how to play baseball for a couple of years. And then last year was really good again on a prove-it year with the Cubs. He's a guy that is a lefty bat, power bat. I could see him being one of those guys who his batting average is going to fall again as a Yankee, but he's going to hit over 40 home runs if he's healthy. He's also a guy who can play some center field if you need him to. And I think also importantly, he's a guy who can play first base. Rizzo is not going to be here forever. And I think that could be an easy transition to get Bellinger playing first eventually, especially if a guy like Jason Dominguez works out and you kind of want him in the outfielder. I have Kiermaier here. Not that Kiermaier is the solution going forward, but he is the Band-Aid until the Band-Aid comes off of poor Jason Dominguez's elbow. So that's how I have us acquiring a left fielder. I was able to, accomplish my last goal of trading Stanton. Like I said earlier, I think it's possible. I do think there's teams that would do it, but I think it's going to be a messy trade. And I think it's something that, you just got to find the right partner for it. The whole comments from Cashman, I thought were really weird, kind of like just downplaying him and saying he's going to get hurt, which again, we all know he's going to get hurt, but why did he say it out loud? It was a very weird situation. I'm sure Stanton's not super excited to hear, his GM talking about him that way. But hopefully that kind of gets itself worked out. Other additions now. I'll be honest. The one addition I have here, I don't see, some of these additions I maybe don't necessarily see happening, but maybe I would like to see them happen. And that's bringing back Jordan Montgomery. I think he will end up probably staying in Texas or going elsewhere, signing a bigger contract. But the one thing that we've seen from Yankees, especially Yankee pitchers over the last year, Rich brought up Sonny Gray before, is the can you pitch in New York thing? And for Jordan Montgomery, we know that answer is yes. We know he can do it. I would like to see him come back. I don't think he will. I think especially with the comments of, he's not a playoff pitcher when we traded him, might, spurn him from wanting to come back. That's more of a, hey, here's something I would love to see happen. Who knows if it will. That also kind of goes a little bit with bringing back Gio Urshela. I really was just looking for a cheaper infield option, a guy who can play multiple positions in the infield. Good fielder, can have a decent bat. And I think also some of bringing back Urshela and Monty is I think the Yankees, the feeling around the team has changed so much recently. And even a few years ago when they weren't winning necessarily, they were winning, but they weren't getting to they weren't making the World Series. It felt like Gio was a guy that just the glue guy. Everyone loves Gio. I think he could, if he was willing to play that role. I would again love to see him back. Will he take? Will he want to come back? Who knows? Something I would enjoy personally. Again, talk about Kiermaier out there. Then I have the Yankees having to make some catching moves again. I have Higashioka being sent to Miami. I do think a trade like a Higashioka is interesting because it's, again, if you look at the best, if I'm going to take a quick look of who are the best free agent catchers available, it's Yasmani Grandal, Austin Hedges, Mitch Garver is out there. He would be probably your top value guy. But a guy like Higgy who plays really good defense. He's a good framer, which until we have robo-umping, that's going to be very important, and could have a hot bat. I never know what team might value that. So I do think, they might be able to get a little something for him. I'm not saying anything massive, but a little something. I think the last other thing I had here, I do have them bring Wandy back. Again, he seems like a guy that is popular in the clubhouse, and I think bringing him back in as a lefty would be a good move for this team.
All right, so Wandy Peralta. So I like that you're bringing him back. If there was a fourth focus area the Yankees needed to have, for me at least, I would have said a left-handed reliever, because without Wandy, the Yankees have 0 left-handed relievers. So they need to bring in somebody to replace Peralta if they're not bringing back Wandy. Wandy's a safe bet. I like the deal there. I think you nailed it there. I think what was it, 12? Yeah, $12 million over 2 years. That's a perfect deal. And as much as I love to see, Monty come back and Gio come back, I know it's like, get a little whiff of nostalgia.
It would just make me feel good. Is that going to happen? I don't know.
It makes me feel good, but I'm like, hey, can we move on to other options? Can we see what else is out there? We were already in the pods with these guys. Let's move on to somebody else. Like, I like Monty and Urshela. I love Gio too. I think Gio's actually, if I'm not mistaken, did he not come off a fractured pelvis last season?
He was hurt.
Like had a weird injury.
He was hurt for a lot of last year, but I think again it was a weird, one of those weird injuries that should be.
He might. Now. He honestly might even be in the conversation as a minor league invite guy. At this rate. Coming off an injury like this, he's not going to be a starting player, and the next season comes back. I'll actually, I have to make a correction here because I just realized it. When Tom submitted his roster, he did include Ben Rortvedt on the bench because Rortvedt is out of options, so Austin Wells should not be there. He should be in AAA, so that's on me. But sure yes, Rortvedt's still on the team. Yeah, it is on me. But Higashioka getting traded seems to be the common thing here. We got that Marlins reliever coming back in the mix. I do got to make a note here. We're entrusting Oswald Peraza with a starting job at third base. Obviously, we're moving on from Gleyber Torres, so there's going to be a job open for one of those infielders. So you're feeling confident with the young Peraza.
I think you're at the point again. The number one focus area I had for the the offseason was clearing up the logjam of the infield. And I think a guy, it's interesting. What does Peraza get you in a trade right now? A guy who is younger, a higher prospect who has some mixed success in the majors when he's had, full time. He hasn't had a lot of full-time normal at bats. When he's been pretty good. He's been good defensively, but is a team willing to commit to that? Versus Gleyber Torres, you're going to get for 1 year. He's going to be one of the best hitting second baseman in the league, which he is. You know what you're going to get in a team. I guess it depends, is it going to be a team that's going to trade for them, going to be going for it like the Dodgers? Dodgers are going to prefer Gleyber Torres. They want a guy who they can plug into their lineup and they know, is going to be able to produce. Or if they're going to make a trade with someone like San Diego, they might be more willing to wait on Oswald Peraza. Again, not that they need infield depth, but that sort of situation where maybe you're more okay with waiting a little bit. So it really depends what kind of team you're going to be able to make the dance with. So that's why I had Gleyber going here.
I think the most there are two things that are the most fascinating things when it comes to Yankee offseason. I think one is that how much are they willing to spend? Are they willing to exceed that final tax threshold? Both of you guys have them staying within it by a hair.
Yeah. They were just under the other one. Was it last year? Right. They went right up to the ceiling almost. So yeah. I see them going, their payroll is going to be $290 million. They're going to bring in there's going to be at least one big impact, big contract coming onto this roster in the offseason.
Yeah. Right. And so, that then leads into the second fascinating question is, if you're going to overhaul this offense, and obviously Cody Bellinger and Juan Soto are the two options, you could even theoretically bring in two of those guys by trading Gleyber Torres. And I think Gleyber Torres's future with the Yankees is probably the second most fascinating, because if we had this conversation a year ago, which we did, I think the sentiment was probably 75% Yankee fans wanted Gleyber Torres dealt or didn't see him fit in with this team long term. I think that sentiment has now changed, where it's probably now 60-40 coming off a really good year for him. But I think it's fair to say, is Gleyber at second base, being a right-handed hitter in this offense, the right guy to invest in long term? And I congratulate Tom, because I'm very surprised Tom went this way. I think Tom agrees, and I agree with him, that he's not the right guy. And I think you need to transform. He is the second best hitter in your offense. I think you need to find a way to transform his production to a left-handed power bat. And in this case, it's Bellinger. And in Rich's case, it would be Soto.
I don't think it's that he's not the right guy. I just think he's the guy who has the value to get something back. I think that's more of it. Now, if he stayed this year, and let's say he had another really good year, what would his extension even look like? Because you are then tying into the redundancy of your right-handed, slower, more power hitting guys, and that's not what probably is going to be more balanced.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Kind of being a little selfish with my game plan, and the reason why I didn't trade Gleyber Torres here, and I had a contingency plan in Donovan if you do not sign Torres next year. I'm curious of what a contract year Gleyber Torres looks like. And so I'm almost keeping him for that production for 2024, knowing in the back of my head, this guy will probably not re-sign.
I'd be very happy with I'd be happy with him.
Most likely.
I'd be happy with him. But if he stays, then you have to trade Peraza. You have to move one of those guys.
Somebody has to.
And moving DJ LeMahieu, I think, is going to be difficult. The other thing I saw earlier today, actually not that long ago, Yankees seem to have, this is, reporting, and who the hell knows, Yankees have some interest in a left-handed hitting Korean outfielder, Jung-Hoo Lee. Yeah, so listen, what's that? I don't know. Is that hey, if we don't get Bellinger, we're gonna go after this guy, or what that is. I don't think any of us are gonna be able to explain, what he projects to be, and anyone who says that they know what he projects to be is lying at this point.
He's another break glass option. There's a lot of comparisons to Yoshida from the Red Sox with him. And they would consider that his financials would probably be around the same as Yoshida. So he is definitely a contingency plan if the Yankees don't go in and bring in any of the outfielders we mentioned tonight. But Corey, what was your thoughts on Thomas's plan here?
Yeah, no, the two things I'll bring up. I mean, one with Cody Bellinger. I think pretty much across the Yankee universe, if they don't bring in one of the big lefty bats, I think there's going to be a lot of frustrated Yankee fans. Yep. And the big two that make the most sense are Bellinger and Soto. Ohtani's obviously in there. The problem with Ohtani is you have the logjam then at DH between Stanton and Ohtani. So Bellinger and Soto make the most sense. I do think they end up with one of them, whether it's Soto or Bellinger. I guess you could flip the coin, but both of them make a ton of sense for what they need. And the other piece too with Gleyber Torres, I actually do agree that this is probably an offseason you do want to trade Gleyber Torres, and it's because, like you said, you have a logjam now of infielders with the New York Yankees. The highest asset return that you can get is probably going to be from Gleyber Torres, because you're not trading Volpe, obviously. So Gleyber Torres is going to get you your biggest return. Turn that strength into another strength for a position that is of lesser depth on your team. That's one route you could go about doing it. Now, I know Michael Bush is an infielder, but he's a very high prospect. You have a ton of years of control, whereas Gleyber, you don't have that luxury. You're going.
I think I was reading too that I think he played a little bit of outfield at the end of last year.
Yeah, he played around a little bit. I do like him as and a lefty bat too is definitely a value add.
Well, here's the big problem that Torres and even extending him creates. If you go out and get a Bellinger or a Soto and you extend Torres, you're spending cap and ability to improve the team in the next few years becomes severely hindered.
Yeah. You have to go over that.
You have to basically commit to being over that fourth tier threshold for the next 3 years until Stanton come off the books, because you're paying two guys upwards of 20 million each, I would assume, and in Soto's case, you have to go to 35. So the team is going to look the same. I think just for the sake of needing to change the core construction of the lineup, I just think Torres is going to be the odd man out. I don't see a scenario where you can justify extending him, whether it's he's going to get $20 million a year. So how is this lineup going to have any chance to change other than the young kids developing in the near future? So I think that's why he kind of has to be the odd guy out.
Yeah.
Just because of the situation they're in, and they're desperate. They're absolutely desperate for a power left-hand bat, and they don't seem to have one in the pipeline. And that means you either have to go out and get Bellinger or Soto, and probably commit to them long term, or be willing to commit to one of them long term.
Yeah, I mean, if you get Soto, you obviously you're gonna, if you're getting Bellinger, you're committing to him long term. If you get Soto, your move is you're gonna want to commit to him long term. But the Yankees are also in a situation where they have right now the best pitcher in the American League on their roster in Garrett Cole, and they have the best hitter in the American League, possibly in all baseball, in Aaron Judge. They need to attack the window that they have, and they need to improve again. They need to use assets they have to make improvements other places and to spend money where they can, because you can't just let this, this next few years go away without taking a serious run at it. Because after that, you're going to a full, hope you have more prospects coming up, and it's a full reset. You're not going to, Cole he's not going to be your ace in 5 years, even though he'll still be under contract, right? He'll most likely be, kind of falling back. Judge the same point. He's not going to be what he is now. You have to attack it. So that's why I love the idea of Soto. I think Rich and I we figured let's take both sides of that coin.
Yeah.
I actually, even at one point, I doubt Rich put it together, because Rich put a ton of work in putting these graphics. I had a full Death Star plan of bringing in Bellinger and Soto, and saying we stayed under the payroll. It was interesting.
You can do it. I mean,
do it. It just
Gleyber's got to buy. Gleyber can't be on the team.
Yeah, Gleyber wasn't on the team. Gleyber was gone,
and I don't think you do the Monty deal either. If you don't do that, I think if you take the Monty deal out, you have the room to do it. Then you just would not address the pitching at all.
And I think the other part about that was like the bench was garbage, and the bullpen was stripped. It was basically like, listen, these 9 guys who are throwing out there, they better put up a ton of runs a game, because if they don't, and Garrett Cole isn't Garrett Cole, they're not going to do very well.
It would be a fun game to watch, though.
Well, listen, I mean, if you're going to go full Death Star mode and go, let's say Bellinger's the first to sign, then you say the hell with it, you trade for Soto, and you keep Torres, and you just let Soto and Torres walk at the end of the year, and you reset the tax. You go over for 1 year. That is a scenario I can see the Yankees doing. My only problem is, as a Yankee fan and as somebody who's seen what the Yankees how they've operated in the last half dozen years, they don't seem willing to go over that tax, and that's the big question.
I mean, they did. They went over the previous high tax. That this new Cohen tax is new, but like they went over what the old tax was like only a few years ago. They went over that amount. So
I mean, it wasn't even a penalty, really. I mean, it was, what was it, 15% or something like that.
More than that.
The Cohen tax has now brought it to another level where it almost adds 50% of your payroll. I think it does add 50% of your payroll on it. So the Yankees have not shown a willingness to go over that threshold since they implemented it. So,
well, on that note, great stuff, everybody. You all did an excellent job. I got to give a hand to my three co-hosts here. They did such a fantastic job with their research. And for one last time, we'll scroll through some of the all-season, all the all-season genders that we have here between the Mets and Yankees. And listen, I think you look at any of these plans, I think both fan bases would be happy with if any one of these plans come through. Maybe somebody will have the luck as Corey did last year. And hopefully we all do. Hopefully the Mets end up with Yamamoto. Hopefully the Yankees end up with a coveted outfielder, and then we'll all be happy. And honestly, guys, wouldn't it just be best for baseball if the New York baseball media just took over the market this coming off season? Just trade the winter meetings is just Mets sign, Yankees sign, Yankees trade, Mets trade.
Race.
Yeah. It's going to be an arms race. And I think realistically, they are going to be the two best. They're going to be the two headliners after it's all said and done. I think it'd be disappointing if neither one of these teams were up there. So, great stuff, everybody, but it is 8:30 p.m., so we did say 90 minutes, and guess what? We're wrapping up in 90 minutes. Next time, we will be back on your airways. It will be episode number 69. Nice. The 2023 winter meetings will be Monday, December the 4th, and that is actually the Monday of the winter meeting. So we're going to get into all the latest transactions, and we're going to come up with our predictions on where some of the remaining top free agents and trade targets are headed to for that week and beyond that winter. So that'll be on episode 69, December the 4th. So we'll see you in 2 weeks' time. But until then, I have a major holiday coming up on Thursday, and I know we thank everybody after a show. So let's put some extra emphasis with the Thanksgiving holiday coming up. And Thomas, you can start us off. What do you got to say to our fans?
I like to thank my wife for going out to pick up my cough medicine because I feel like I'm dying right now. So I'm really looking forward to that and just absolutely passing out later. Thankful for the Yankees trading for Juan Soto, which is going to be very exciting and then lead to a lot of heartbreak, probably around late September next year. And your normal, your friends, your family, and that sort of stuff.
Great stuff, Thomas. Love that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thankful for my our families getting together. Thankful for my wife, who's had a crazy year this year. And at the end of the day, we're healthy. Everybody's healthy right now, and that's all you can ask for. So thankful for all that.
Yep. No, 100% echo that. Thank you guys for, the great season we had this year, despite our teams not having a great season. Thankful for the chooches in the chat and all the listeners out there for tuning in. And also thankful that no major news impacted my offseason agenda before we released the offseason agendas.
I was afraid of that so much. I was like, watching this hour, the biggest one out of these teams, and that would have been that. But yes, actually, to echo the sentiments of all three, I want to thank my family, my loved ones. I love you all. Thank you all. You're the reason why I do this. Thank you for all our supporters. Thank you, my three co-hosts, for putting in the time and energy towards these all-season agendas. I want to thank the unanimous voters that voted Gerrit Cole as the American League Cy Young Award winner for 2023. Hopefully, we have the same luck with some other Yanks and Mets pitchers for the coming season. But until then, and until our next episode, we will see you here in 2 weeks' time for episode number 69. Take care.